the Nation, where we talk about news, we talk about culture, and we say, yeah, our democratic institutions are fraying, but Taylor and Travis are engaged, so all is not lost. I am your host, Negin Farsad, and if ever a country needed a beautiful people to declare their lifelong love intentions, it's now. Today, we'll catch up with some of what we missed through Labor Day, like the Cracker Barrel logo saga, say that 15 times fast, a new dating show for virgins. We'll also check in on the DC occupation, how Trump's hatred of windmills has blossomed, and finally, the Gen Z cohort who are trying to hack getting rich in their 20s. Oh my God, I'm so excited by today's panel. First, if you heard her on the show before, she's a filmmaker, she's a comedian, she's a beloved Fake the Nation regular. You can see her live show Adult Sex Ed, which also has a Substack. She's even directing a doc about extremism, which I'm sure we'll end up talking about on the show when it comes out. It is the wonderful Dani Faith Leonard. Hey, Dani.
Hello. Thank you for having me back.
So excited you're here. I am also joined by host of the podcast Pulling the Thread. She's also author of On Our Best Behavior, which is no big deal, a New York Times bestseller. I'm so excited to have her on the show for the very first time. It's Elise Loehnen. Hey, Elise.
Hi, how are you? I noticed I'm not a comedian, and so I already feel left out, but that's okay.
You know, the show does tend toward the comedian, but then it's like the comedians and then the non-comedians who can hang. So you're in a special category.
I have a good laugh, I hear.
Non-comedians who can hang.
Yeah. I'll find you funny, so I'll be a good audience.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. That we need pity from our non-comedian panelists. So before we get into the show, I just want to remind listeners that they can support the show by going to the Patreon at patreon.com/Negin Farsad. In fact, today we're going to record one of those bonuses. And it is about gut feelings. There's like new scientific data that suggests that gut feelings are just human beings telling the future, whatever. There's actual science or maybe some kind of partially peer-reviewed science about it. And these are the kinds of conversations that are wild, that are fun, that are riveting, that are just more of the Fake the Nation that you already love in your earballs for as little as $4 a month. So go to patreon.com/Negin Farsad to get a hit of more of what you love. All right, and now let's get into it with topic number one. All right, we're going to dig into culture, and I want to catch up on some of what happened just before Labor Day. So first up is the mystifying controversy over the cracker, why do I have a hard time saying this? Cracker Barrel logo. Never before has a transition to a slightly modified font and the removal of the orange silhouette of an old man and a barrel on the logo of a frankly fourth-rate restaurant chain caused so much of a cultural stir. I don't know, Dani, can you explain to me why this logo became the new battleground of a woke versus not woke argument online?
I think like for those who are at the top and for people in the media, the right-wing media, events like this are a really convenient distraction because while they're talking about this Cracker Barrel logo, they're not talking about things like Jeffrey Epstein. But I think that there are people who are consumers who are like actually taking these things to heart. And I did follow this a little bit. I followed it once Trump jumped into this, and I think he tweeted or truthed. Is that what we say?
Yeah.
Truthed.
Or just digitally pooped.
Yeah, he farted, make Cracker Barrel a winner again. And I think what was so funny like about that to me is that it never was. Like I think I think it's like the kind of establishment, like it's the kind of restaurant, I guess if we could call it that. I've been to one before, and we can. If it's the kind of place where like the whole point of it is that it's not a winning place. Like that's what people are attached to about it. It's not like an elitist place to go to. So I think that was really funny. But I guess it all falls into this kind of nostalgia that that people on the right are jumping into, that there was a time that was so much better than this time. And during that time, we were allowed to enjoy logos like this one and Confederate statues. And it's all part of this nostalgia that I think is, like, frankly, really sad because I don't think that I don't think that this is such a loaded logo.
Right, Elise, did anyone ever say to you that they were triggered by the Cracker Barrel logo? I have to say it so slowly, or else I'll slur all my words. This is where, like, this is my Achilles heel of talking. Elise, did you ever hear that anyone was upset by this logo?
No, and nor was it the changing of the guard of the logo attached to any statement around sort of the quote wokeification that they've been accused of. As you mentioned, it's just a slightly cleaner, better font. And as someone who I grew up in Montana, and when a Cracker Barrel opened alongside the highway,
you were gonna say,
it was news.
I thought you were gonna. Oh my god.
It was exciting.
I thought you were gonna say I grew up in a barrel. And as someone
mostly, yeah. But I loved going to Cracker Barrel. They have very butter drenched eggs. I haven't been there in probably 30 years, but they also had this amazing. Again, this will date me, but you could rent an audiobook. So the idea was that you would road trip across the country with Cracker Barrel, and then you'd return it, and you could take another one at the next Cracker Barrel that you came to on the road. So that was an excellent service, I have to say.
Like on tape or
yes.
CD or whatever?
Yes, before Audible, So I will say...
so, like...
Yeah. I'm going to stand
know.
for Cracker Barrel for a minute here, who I also feel like has just been swept up in one of these fake culture wars, and say, I liked that gift shop, I liked the stick candy, and I liked the audiobook rental program. So here's to Cracker Barrel. Let's make them win. Just kidding. But yeah, it's a ridiculous, as Dani just said, it's a ridiculous distraction. And what they're doing is they're essentially sort of reverse playbooking what they accuse the left of, right? Which is like it's sort of hysterical attention to cultural misfires, right? And policing people's language, et cetera. And they are then sort of using that against the left in a way that I think will ultimately burn out their base. Like there's only so much of these shenanigans that I think people can tolerate before they're just tired.
Because it's kind of like boring. I mean,
it's boring.
Ultimately, following on the heels of the Sydney Sweeney thing, which we talked about on the show a few weeks ago, the Sydney Sweeney thing, like this one, felt like ginned up by the right. Like it's, in the Sydney Sweeney thing, it was a straw man argument that people on the left were upset by the Sydney Sweeney ad. Though I maybe there was a few people on the left. Though there's enough like crazy people on any side of anything to say something stupid, and maybe those couple of them did, and then they turned it into an issue that like supposedly the entire left was upset about that jeans ad. But like I actually don't care. I didn't know anyone who cared about that jeans ad. And similarly here, I don't actually think very many people on the right cared about the changing of the logo. Like they're gonna get the same buttery eggs, right? And the fact that like Cracker Barrel is so literary, I feel like that we
buried the lead in the story, I think.
I didn't remember that.
We should be leading with that in every news story. Literary giant Cracker Barrel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Has been a beacon of the right. What? You know what I mean?
Yes.
I mean, none of this makes sense.
Clearly, they're actually an anti-intellectual institution if they promote reading.
Totally.
For me, growing up, Cracker Barrel was a road trip place because I grew up in New York and we didn't have them. So it was a place that we would stop at almost everyone we passed because we were little kids, so we had to pee a lot, and I would get the stick candy.
Yes.
And I love Cracker Barrel, and I don't think that Trump has ever been to one.
No.
Oh, yeah. No, there's no way. Although he, he likes a burger or whatever, so like maybe. I
That's
also want
true.
to mention that Fox News talked about the Sydney Sweeney ad 766 times on the air that week, and by contrast, only mentioned Jeffrey Epstein 53 times the week of that controversy. Now, I don't have the same stat on Cracker Barrel, but I do think like your point about just trying to, I think, who's Danny? I think it was your point about just trying to like gin it up, make it, people talk about it, whatever. Like those statistics show that tends to be the case. Now let's move on to another area of culture. There's a new reality show on Hulu. It's called Are You My First? And it's a reality show for virgins. Some of them might be virgins who don't count anal. Like I don't really know, but according to Hulu, it's according to Hulu's publicity materials, it's the largest, hottest group of virgins ever assembled, searching for intimacy, love, and maybe their first in a tropical paradise designed just for them, which is interesting because I guess virgins have different tropical design paradise needs than others.
Clearly.
Yes. So I guess, I don't know, is this a nice counterpoint to what is more tawdry reality TV, or is it something else? What do you guys think?
Something else. I mean, the immediate question is, are these people who want to be virgins and maintain their virginity, or is this Steve Carell, right? And 40-year-old virgin, like, are these people who, for whatever reason, have not been able to lose it, or are these people who are preserving it? So that's one question. Is this like some weird purity culture
young.
play? They're young.
They're young and they're trying to hold on to it. Now, apparently, of the current cast, only one of them is trying to hold, or like has stated that they're trying to hold on to it for like purely religious reasons.
Okay.
Others are trying to hold on to it for like to make it special or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, but so there is, I guess there's maybe some slight coding of conservatism here. I should also note that the hosts are both from the reality TV world, and one of the hosts, Colton Underwood, his Bachelor winner, he was on The Bachelor, and his winner, Casey Randolph, that they won together, or however that works, filed a temporary restraining order against him in 2020 for alleged stalking and harassment. And he's actually been, which is weird, just for the record, and I don't know, obviously alleged. And he's been open about how his virginity stemmed from a religious trauma that prevented him from coming out as gay for a
he's
long
married to
time.
Jordan Brown, and he has a child. Yeah.
So that's all.
And I feel like I've never met Colton. I can't speak for him, but Jordan Brown is a political strategist on the left. So I can't imagine that Colton is like, would participate in something that feels wildly conservative and oppressive. But I mean,
Right.
this is conjecture, right?
I don't know. Yeah. Danny?
Yeah. I think that any kind of like public attention on virginity reminds me of like the purity culture time of the late 90s and early 2000s, when celebrities were wearing the purity rings and people were really focused on Britney Spears's virginity, and all of these other pop stars who kind of like had to publicly announce that they were still virgins in order to receive the public support. I feel like we've like kind of devolved back into that time again, which like makes sense. I feel like there have been a lot of studies that have come out that have said that Gen Z, is more conservative and they're not having a lot of sex. But I worry about that because that period of like purity culture in the media really brought a lot of shame to a lot of people. And I just feel like any kind of public attention on virginity and purity is kind of a strange like hearkening back to a past time.
But
Yeah.
by the way, there was another show on TLC earlier this summer that was just called Virgins, and it's about 34 to 42-year-old virgins who want to just finally figure it out and get, rid of their virginity. So there's like something happening, and it might just be in all of this a naked ploy to find more reality TV viewers because that might be the only thing that anyone's watching. You know
Well,
what I
yeah,
mean?
I think it's like a hook, right, to capture the Love Island crowd, which find
Right.
myself being a member of somehow. This summer it happened, you guys. I slid into Love
Wow. So
Island.
what pulled you in?
A flight to Australia where I had no Wi-Fi, if I'm honest, and then I was just desperate, and there was a Love Island All Stars UK, and
Okay.
I started watching it, and then yeah, I'm bought. I'm bought in. But I will say what's interesting about those shows is that obviously everyone they all sleep in the same bedroom and there are some shenanigans, but they seem to be quite chaste. I don't know. Who knows what's really happening under those covers, but it's the least interesting. The only thing that's ever interesting is when someone like goes all the way in a voyeuristic situation. Like that's kind of a fascinating move, but mostly it's not about that, and that's not interesting, I think, to the viewer. So it's weird that that's now the thing.
Right. And actually, I mean, we don't know. They haven't released all the episodes, obviously, but like the interesting thing is, like, they might. I mean, it's not, I don't know that we'd see them go all the way, or maybe like that's the thing, like, and then they get married and go all the way, or I don't know, whatever. Apparently in one episode, a contestant talked about like how the man should be like the leader of the house or something. So there are these like really
Ooh.
like gender normative, weird, heteronormative moments that are also very patriarchal and old school. I don't know, but I mean, but that's, I think, spice of life. If you can find a cat, they probably cast him because of that reason, right? Like this one guy. That's where you get your drama, is someone being anti-feminist. I don't know, folks. Are you watching this? What is it called? Are You My First? Are you guys gonna watch Are You My First? Let me know. I'm so curious. Do you need to see virgins on TV, but like hot virgins on TV? All right, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, it's politics. And we are back. And now it's time to talk about politics. Let's play some catch up there, too. It looks like the National Guard is still in D.C., and now Trump is saying that Chicago is next. Interestingly, D.C.'s mayor has been kind of quiet on this front. The city doesn't have autonomy politically, as you know, so that's an issue. But also, maybe Mayor Bowser's, being bombastically against this troop deployment is the wrong strategy. There hasn't been much in the way of mass protest either. What do you guys think of the general reaction? Does it make sense to kind of keep it a little quieter considering Trump's temperament?
I mean, I would say I think you just you named it, that DC doesn't have the same political autonomy. So you aren't getting these blue state governors who are essentially standing up for citizens. I just don't think that what is the mayor going to do in the face of Trump? So in that sense, I think the mayor is probably being wise. Maybe not wise. I don't know if wise is the right word, but I understand that instinct to just be like, I'm just going to get through this until this goes away, and he loses interest and chooses a different target. I do feel like DC citizens have been out. I don't know that it's being covered, but I'm seeing it on my social. Are you?
I mean, my sense that it's been kind of like tame compared to what DC's capable of, like
Right.
protest wise. I don't know. Danny, what do you think?
I have family in DC, and they've just I I'm not going to say that they've thrown up their hands, but I think that the the usual instinct to go out and protest doesn't seem to be what anyone I know is thinking. And it
Mm-hmm.
could be that, usually the threat when there's a big protest happening is that they'll send in the National Guard, but the National Guard's already there. So I don't know if that's affecting how people are feeling about it. But yeah, I guess maybe there is this sense of if we're quiet, maybe he'll just lose interest. I don't know that that's the right way to go about anything, but I do think that there's, like a traditional burying in the sand that happens when a bully is there for too long. I'm not sure.
I mean, so Chicago is apparently next, and obviously, like, the governor of Illinois and mayor of Chicago have been pretty like loud and clear about not wanting it. I don't know. Like they'll probably get it anyway.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Although interestingly, literally in the last couple of days, there was a ruling that said a federal judge ruled that the deployment of troops in LA in June was illegal. And Trump responded to that saying, like, well, we're going to send them to Chicago anyway. Now, part of me wonders, again, like, this is all like, how do you handle this fucking guy, right? And part of me wonders if there's an opportunity, and again, this is just, I'm just throwing ideas out, and they're all probably terrible. But what do you guys think about spinning it so that it's like, oh my God, thank you, Trump, for spending more money, helping, with the troops, joining our community policing program, and basically making him look like a socialist for spending so much money on helping cities, like and they could use words like community and social services. You know what I mean? And then make it seem like Trump is helping them with community and social services to the tune of, by the way, to be able to make these deployments, it's $1 million a day. It is not
Yeah.
an insignificant investment, if you want to call it an investment, in a city.
Well, I think LA is a really interesting example, actually, because we started our year with National Guard in a very helpful way, right? After the fires, we had the National
Right.
Guard come in and just protect neighborhoods and stop looting. And they were just present. It was peaceful. It wasn't a big deal. It was requested, right? They responded
Yeah.
to a request. And living in LA now and being downtown in the day before sort of he sent in the National Guard, I felt like we did a good job actually, or Newsom did a good job, and Mayor Bass at saying, like, this is an extreme waste of money. You have no place for these people to sleep. There's nothing to do here. I think anyone who understands LA isn't concerned about sort of our police force being potentially like overly activated and violent toward its citizens anyway. So there's like nobody here is confused about whether the LAPD can handle protests or quote unquote rioting, right? Like we are Rodney King. I mean, like we don't
Yeah,
have
no,
the
you
best
got it, yeah.
reputation. And so I
No.
think Newsom being like, this is a complete waste of these National Guard people's time and resources is the right move of just like letting it play out and being like, this is how he's spending your money. This is how he's spending your money.
Well, it's just weird because there were federal reductions
Yeah.
in literal like local law enforcement investment, and so in supporting local law enforcement. So part of it is like, we're going to cut the funds at the federal level, and then we're going to just, in a case of some cities that are randomly selected and not based on crime statistics, we'll then put money back in through this National Guard deployment, that's not coordinated with any like localized effort on the ground. Like, none of it makes sense. I also just want to point out that there are several cities in red states that have the same or worse levels of crime than DC. Places like Kansas City, St. Louis, Springfield, Missouri, Birmingham, Alabama, Cleveland, Dayton, Toledo, all in Ohio, Tulsa in Oklahoma, Memphis and Nashville in Tennessee. So anyways, the list goes on. There's plenty of red states that actually have crime. So,
Yes.
and there's no deployment in those cities. So obviously the whole thing is ridiculous. Let's switch gears quickly and talk about the Trump shutting down windmills. Like, this is just like maybe one of the smaller stories that maybe kind of like didn't get as much attention. But one of the things that the Trump administration has done in the last few weeks is they shut down a bunch of wind energy projects, including ones that were almost done being built. And there's one in Rhode Island that was supposed to help, provide energy for something like 300,000 people or whatever. And they were just in the finishing leg of their program, and they were shut down. Their wind energy permit was just revoked by the Trump administration. What do you think? What do you think? It's just, I'm upset, Dani.
I when I saw that we were going to be talking about this, I wanted to go back and look at some research because I remembered that there was this Trump and wind story that goes back a really long time. And it was all the way back in 2012. Trump had bought land in Scotland and he wanted to build like the greatest golf course in history, but then realized that there was going to be a wind farm that was going to be built and obstructing his like beautiful views of the water. And so he's been really salty about wind ever since. And so I wanted to go back and remember what the personal reason was. And he had sued the government of Scotland. He'd sued the UK government to try to prevent this wind farm from being built. And then they ruled against him. And then he appealed. And then the UK courts unanimously ruled against his appeal. And so I think he's harbored a lot of resentment, and we know that that's what Trump is, and his views are just a series of long-standing personal resentments. And so wind is one of them, and it's such a stupid resentment to have. And all of his kind of opinions that he's given about wind over the years, about how it's really bad for the birds and all of those really stupid views, I feel like it's just become something that is incredibly silly, but now having real world impacts.
Yeah, Elise, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's part of also an effort to undermine a whole clean energy program that we're certainly going to be relying on if we want to stay on this planet. And I think it's a symptom of his administration going out and making all clean energy incredibly difficult to clear, and to get the permits and to get the planning and and some of this is part of sort of what we've inherited. We have a lot of legislation around, or rules around, building anything, which is somewhat good, but we do have to clear some of it in order to meet our energy needs of the future. But I think when he does maneuvers like this and makes it impossible, he's diminishing people's appetite for investing in clean energy and making it really hard for us to move off the fossil fuels that we've been relying on. So the impacts are massive. Ultimately, like the ripple, just like, I can't deal with this insanity effect is definitely a deterrent. And yeah, it's ridiculous.
It takes millions of dollars to build these farms. And so it's like people have to really come in knowing that there's going to be a sound kind of public-private partnership in getting them done, And so then to have a permit ripped away when you're in the 11th hour of finishing it is so ridiculous. And, I grew up around windmills. I grew up in Palm Springs. We have a very famous windmill farm as you enter Palm Springs. And I remember when they went from just like, I don't know, 30 windmills to like hundreds of windmills. I remember that transition. And I remember literally no one complaining about it. Like, I don't know, like we just, as a city, didn't give a fuck. Like, we're like, that's great. It's giving us clean energy? Cool. Like, it just, no one cared. And it seemed to, do the job of giving the energy that this vast desert with few resources really needed. And so I think I just don't understand. It's a source of energy that goes back decades. So come on. But this is a real problem. And I think if you are that company, I'm assuming they're going to sue. I'm assuming, Rhode Island's going to get in and sue. The story is still developing, but like you also can't have legislation from the Biden administration on the Inflation Reduction Act that's funding a lot of these programs. You can't be like, oh, now it's a different administration, we're not going to honor what was passed by Congress in previous administrations. That's also illegal, whatever. A lot of this stuff. And again, we'll see. I'm sure there's suits in the works and that things are going to be overturned, but like, this is the kind of thing that's dumb. And also, we can't, they're trying to keep coal plants operational, even when some of them are like, please let us shut down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we're not profitable anymore. Because coal is not only really deleterious to the environment, but it's also just no longer profitable. So like, let this be about money. If it has to be about money, fine, let it be about money. And clean energy is obviously the kind of energy that's going to make more money. Anyway, I don't know. My ears are fuming. I'm a cartoon character and there's steam coming out of them. That's what's happening right now.
Also, if we're going to talk about the petty thing, I was
Yeah.
just in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and we were driving outside
Oh,
of the
shit.
city, and there are a lot of wind turbines, and they're beautiful. So even if we're going to just talk about it in those terms, like putting those wind turbines within like a natural setting, it doesn't really obstruct the view as much as like other kind of energy plants could. So I feel like even that argument is absolutely silly and pointless.
I know, because no one is looking. I mean, he never seen like another power plant. They're ugly. Like, I don't understand. I mean, they're like arguably uglier than windmills, And so, I don't. You're right. You're right. If we're getting petty, let's fucking get petty. Okay, now let us move on to topic number 3. The Wall Street Journal, Fortune, and possibly others reported on a Gen Z trend that's basically that work-life balance in your 20s is for suckers. You should work a lot in your 20s so that you can become a millionaire first. One such Gen Zer said, quote, young people can maximize their peak physical and cognitive years. And, quote, when you front load success early, you buy the luxury of choice for the rest of your life. Now, my question to the two of you is, do you buy this new mentality? What do you think, Elise?
I buy it actually, but I with an extreme caveat, which is it depends on the priorities that you hold for your life. So if you're an ambitious little monster and you want to be stacking bills in the bank and you want to be at the top of your industry, yeah, put your 20s on a sacrificial pyre. For many people, that's not their ambition, right? And in that case, yeah, seek balance, have fun, go partying. But I think if you can't, I know we're sort of moving out of a point of culture of this, like you can have it all simultaneously. That's never been my experience. And I think you have to prioritize. So if that's what you want, then by all means. And I don't think it's any corporation's obligation to give that to you. Do I think it's a company's obligation to give you a really good wage and time off and weekends where you're not on Slack? If you're just on a typical career trajectory, yes, 100%. I don't think that people should be overworking to feed sort of the bottom line without feeling like they're actually in turn being taken care of by those corporations and are speeding along. It could be by learning a lot. It could be through opportunities. It could be through compensation and bonus structures. But I think so. But I think if that's what you want, then you should absolutely. You're going to need to make sacrifices. I think thinking that you don't have to make sacrifices is a type of insanity. Is that a bummer? I don't know.
Okay, Dani. I do feel a little bummed. I don't know, Dani. What do you think?
I agree in part, and the part that I think I like about this is I do think that work-life balance is a myth, and also I think the for me the real issue with it always has been that it separates work and life into two different things. But I think like you're one person and like your goal should be to live this integrated life where everything is working together. And I guess, yeah, if that person is choosing to be miserable in order to make a lot of money, that is a personal choice. But I do think that the part that's right about this is that work and life don't necessarily need to be two different things. And like, so that whole work-life balance thing I don't agree with. But I mean, but I feel like this whole thing about you need to get rich in your 20s, what I find interesting about this is that this seems like a very Gen X view to me, and Gen X are their parents. So that's what
Mm.
I think is so interesting, that like maybe they are feeding a little bit off their parents' generation's energy in this, because this has like
Like
very like 80s and
in
90s vibes to me.
wait, so in that Gen X didn't work hard in their 20s and so they think that their kids should? Is that what you mean?
No, no, I think that they did. I think that they had like the greed is good. Like I think I'm just thinking about 80s and 90s movies here maybe in
Right,
my
right,
head,
right,
but I'm
right.
thinking
Yeah.
about Wall Street, and I'm thinking about a time where, people, maybe went out and thought that your 20s was a time where you had to go out and get rich.
Right.
I thought
It's
that was more
interesting.
boomer, and that our generation was more. I mean, isn't Michael Douglas like 80 now?
A boom. Right.
He's a
Yeah.
Right.
boomer,
Yeah, he
right?
is a boomer.
Yeah. I don't
I
know.
think it's the time where that was more popular, maybe was a Gen X formative time.
Well,
Agree.
I think it was maybe a little bit more when the boomers were making money. That was popular rhetoric, like in the Wall Street movies and stuff like that. But I think it's interesting because I also sort of don't think. I mean, as a comedian, of which we've all noted that Elise is not, so you can.
I get to be the dour
No, I
bummer.
would, but I mean, I want. I mean, but we're all in like kind of in entertainment and artistic pursuits, right? I worked a shit ton in my 20s, but I also did not make money. Right? So there's a distinction here. Is like you can work really hard as I did, and I had a lot of fun or whatever. But I would say I just did it at the expense of sleep or whatever. And but it was like I was trying to advance an artistic pursuit, which actually has nothing to do with money.
Yeah,
So
but you were refining your craft, right? And you were doing it with a certain amount of intensity. And
yes,
I think this is a story for entrepreneurs who want to go out and make, build, brands that are worth $20 million. And I think for us, we're refining our skills. I made no money. I mean, I was a magazine editor. I made no money, but I certainly killed myself to
right.
advance, and that has paid off really well in my life. So I think it's less about like making money in your 20s and more about setting yourself up so that you
Right, which
are
is interesting
successful.
because none of the reporting talks about that, right? All of the reporting talks about earning money, right? Building wealth so that when you're in your 30s and 40s or whatever, you can live more with leisure and you can stop working, right? That's the idea. And no one talks about anything as if like and it's all in this world of like stuff that you can do that maybe does I don't it also it assumes that those types of jobs, entrepreneurship, financial services, don't require as much craft, that you could just put in the time in your 20s and become really good at, make a lot of money. It's interesting, right? Because I could never say to a 22-year-old, well, you're going to get rich doing stand up. Like, that's not, and in your 20s, that's not going to happen. You have to spend some amount of time getting good at it, And if you do become rich in your 20s, it's probably not lasting. And, or you're just a unicorn, like a really, really unusual case. So it's funny. And it's also like, you can't say that to doctors. Like, there's no recognition here that any job requires actual skill. And I think that's the thing about the reporting of this trend that I find just infuriating. Because, like, you guys, not everything is about making money. And I think that's the other thing is like we've sort of created it's sort of like when you ask a lot of people what do you want to do, they want to be influencers and make money because they see these like influencers like YouTube, being a YouTuber is like one of the number one things kids say they want to be when they grow up, which makes me so sad. there isn't as much of an emphasis on like skill and craft and building the time and fucking 10,000 hours or whatever. That may be a myth, but still, you know? And like, I don't know. Danny, what do you think?
I think something that's interesting is like this concept, but then simultaneously reporting about everyone losing their jobs to AI is it's like encouraging people to go into something that requires no skills so you could succeed fast, but then complaining that they're doing things that can be replaced by AI. But if you're doing something that requires like real personal touch and skill, it's not something that you get successful at really quickly. So
Right.
I do think that these things are kind of competing against each other too. And, you know, I've been thinking about that a lot because I right now I'm in the middle of making this investigative documentary and I'm thinking about how it can never be replaced by AI because that's it's just not a thing that a robot could do. It's not something that artificial intelligence could do, but it's also not something where you're guaranteed to make a lot of money. So I think that it's or any money at all. So
Danny, I made
I think it's
three.
interesting.
I made three feature documentaries in the, in my 20s and early 30s, in that time when I was supposed to be making a shit ton of money or whatever the fuck. And I will say one thing. The only thing that I would say from reading about this one guy, Emil Bar, whatever his name is, that got a lot of attention in the last few weeks, I would say if I could take it back, one thing I would do in my 20s is I would just very casually put more money aside in like mutual funds that could have, the compound interest effect of growing and blah blah blah, so that by the time I'm in my 30s I have like some sort of a nest egg, however small, and then by the time I'm in my 40s, oh look, it's an even bigger, I do think people should start saving and investing early. And I do think that like when you're in an artistic pursuit, nobody talks about that and you're just like struggling to survive. So the idea of even putting $10 aside a month feels like, yeah, I'll do that later. But I do wish I had done more of that, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's he gave a few tips, this kid, on being ruthless, and a few of them are, the first one is outsourcing non-essential tasks like cleaning around the house and preparing meals and getting groceries, like have others do that. The second is trim your social commitments and acknowledge that you might lose some friends and you might suffer social isolation. which sounds, which, this, by the way, that one thing right there brings me to my second thing that I think is not great about this, besides the like no emphasis on actual skills, is no emphasis on actually like the health that your body's needs are in actual friendships and people around you and like sound relationships. And when you don't have those, I think you become crazy. And then later on, so maybe you're becoming rich, but then by the time you have all that money, you're like nuts. You know what I mean? You're socially isolated and you're crazy.
Can I make an offer here, which I think is
Yeah.
really interesting about him actually saying the quiet things out loud,
Yeah.
is I do appreciate his honesty here and the fact that he's sort of outlining the trade-offs that he's made in his life, including friendships and social connection, et cetera, that I think many people would be like, I'm not trading that off. And I prefer this totally weird his weird recipe and the articulation of this than to like the cultural gaslighting that we often participate in, which is like, you can have it all and you are owed this, and if you do this in your 4 hours a week, these are the returns that you'll get. So there's something about him laying it all out in a way that you're
Right.
like, weird
That's
choices,
refreshing.
that is, I think, healthier than pretending like he's just like day trading, partying, and achieving this great success. So I think more transparency is always good.
I guess. Yeah. I don't know. I'm like, I feel like, people choosing paths that even further increase their isolation from one another is like a recipe for social doom. And so it worries me. Anyway. Anyway. All right, folks. Let me know what you think. Are you earning your millions now? Are you earning any millions? Let me know. I'm so curious to hear. And friends, that is the end of the show. Oh my God, what a fun time I had chatting with you guys. And I want the people of Fake the Nation to be able to follow you and all the wonderful things that you do. Elise, where do they do that?
I host a podcast called Pulling the Thread, and I have a Substack newsletter also called Pulling the Thread. You can come and be humorless with me. And I'm on Instagram at Elise Loehnen, and my books are On Our Best Behavior and Choosing Wholeness Over Goodness.
Folks, subscribe to this podcast now and read the book. It is a New York Times bestseller, lest we forget. And Elise, it was so lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Dani, where do people find you?
So I host a show called Adult Sex Ed, and I have a Substack that with the same name, where I talk about a lot of things related to the history of sex and also why we think what we think about sex. And it's been a really fun exploration. But I'm also ready to branch out. So I've been directing a documentary that deals with extremism in America, and I'm almost ready to announce it. So if you follow the Sex Ed Substack, you'll end up hearing about that too. And you can follow me on Instagram also, which I'm promising myself that maybe I'll start using a little bit more. And it's at Dani F. Leonard.
Oh my God, I've made that promise to myself so many times. Folks, you know where to find me. I want to remind listeners, I don't know if I mentioned it last time, I have a new TED Talk out. So you can go to, go to my Instagram so you can find the link. Anyway, but it's TED Talk, Negin Farsad. I have a couple of TED Talks out. This is the most recent one. And it is about this very issue of isolation, but it is comedy. It is comedy. So go check it out. I hope you enjoy it. I'm proud of it, and I would love for the people of Fake the Nation to be able to hear it. And I also want to thank everyone who makes the show a possibility. That's our wonderful producer, Rob Heath. Thanks to Gaby for our theme music. If you have any questions or concerns, you can email us at fakethenationpodcast@gmail.com. And otherwise, we'll be back in your earballs next week.